Everybody, I am George from Ireland, and behind me is the house where Swami Vivekananda stayed when he was in London in 1895 to 1896. Is this house here? That's the portico above the door. So as you can see, a lot of renovation is being done at the floor of it. Anyway, quite appositely, it's just adjoining a church because he's known as a scholar of religion. So he was more or less a Hindu missionary to the West, not quite so much trying to evangelize for his faith, but to promote public understanding of Hinduism in the Occident. Only a few Indologists in Western countries knew much about Hinduism beforehand, and after that a few learned people in the public knew something about it. I mean, a lot of people are staggeringly ignorant even to this day. As recently as the 90s, a lot of people in Western countries used to get Hinduism mixed up with Islam, which I know is jaw-dropping to people from the subcontinent. So back to Swami Vivekananda. That wasn't actually his name. Narendra was his first name at first. Christian name, as people would say in Christian lands. Even though he was obviously brought up in a Hindu family, born at Calcutta or Kolkata, perhaps I should pronounce it, in Bengal, India in 1863, the 12th of January. Incidentally, his birthday is National Youth Day in India. So he was born into a well-to-do family. His father was a highly successful barrister, practicing at the High Court, and his mother was an absolutely devoted homemaker. His grandfathers were both distinguished scholars. He was from one of the middle Hindu castes. They're quite wealthy. He had 8 siblings. His mother had prayed that she be delivered of a male child, but she said that the Almighty had instead given her a little imp because he was bursting with energy. His parents found him unmanageable. He went to boarding school at quite an early age, but his intellectual precocity was recognized. So pretty soon his teachers said, he is a lad of the most exceptional talents. He had a flair for languages. So Bengali was his mother tongue, but he soon learnt the ancient language Sanskrit, which is hardly spoken, only a written language. And so he was very well versed in the ancient Hindu scriptures, the Bhagavad Gita, Upanishads, the Vedas, the Mahabharata and others. These are things I've only scratched the surface of. And then he acquired absolute mastery in the English language. And remember, in the 1870s, very few Indians could speak English. I know perhaps 40% of Indians can speak English to some level these days, from absolute perfection down to just a smattering and every level in between. But for the 1870s, that was highly unusual. So he went to what's now Scotch Church College in Calcutta, one of the most estimable schools in the city. And remember, of course, at that time, Calcutta was the capital of British India. Anyway, so he decided that he wanted to make religious scholarship and leadership his path in life. So he was a disciple of Ramakrishna, if I pronounce it correctly, who was a notable Hindu mystic of the late 19th century. And he followed his lifestyle of asceticism at times, took monkish vows, although on other occasions later in life he was rather fleshy-faced and corpulent. Swami Vivekananda became known as Swami Vivekananda, as in that's his name and religion, because his surname I think was Dutt, if I'm pronouncing that right, Narendra, as in what a subsequent king of Nepal was named. Anyway, so he then went overseas to spread knowledge of the Hindu faith. He travelled here to the United Kingdom. He stayed here for some time and made contact with the tiny Indian community in London back then. And he travelled extensively throughout the United Kingdom and various other European countries. He met many German academics who were students of India. He visited Oxford University, for example, and he then went to the United States, where he delivered hundreds of lectures to packed houses, and he earned a lot of money for that, but he wasn't avaricious, so he was mostly donating it to worthy causes. So he went on 2 extended visits to the West. He also visited Sri Lanka, then called Ceylon. So he published very extensively, partly texts of his lectures. And anyway, he returned to India. His guru, Ramakrishna, had died in, I'm trying to think about this, it would have been 1887. And so Swami Vivekananda felt the end of his life coming fairly early. So he died at the age of, we were only about 39, if I got that right. He was cremated on the same ghat beside the river Ganges, where his master in spirituality had left this earth 16 years prior to him. So that is Swami Vivekananda. You can see his image all over India. I've known about him for 21 years. And that's a fascinating little chapter of his life, his brief sojourn in London town. So please follow me on Facebook, on Instagram, on Twitter, and book online lectures of me in history, politics, religious studies, French, law, English literature, English language. English is a foreign language, and I translate from French, Spanish, Italian, German, Romanian and Russian. I'm a tour guide here in Londinium when tourism opens one of these days. By a most curious irony, he happens to live around the corner from where Churchill was living at the time, Sir Winston Churchill. That's enough from me. Toodaloo.